For 10 years, I was invisible in my own home. My parents looked at me like I was nothing. My brother laughed at me like I was a joke. I believed them. I believed I was worthless. But on my 18th birthday, I opened a letter from my dead grandmother, and everything I thought I knew about my family turned out to be a lie. My whole life was built on a secret so dark, so twisted, that they spent a decade trying to destroy me to hide it. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how I went from being a ghost in my own home to becoming the architect of my family's reckoning. It is a story about a grandmother's secret, a mother's cruelty, a father's silence, and the long, painful road to finding out that the people who are supposed to love you the most can be the very ones who destroy you. My earliest memories are not of warm hugs or bedtime stories. They are of a quiet hum of disapproval. The first time I truly felt its weight was on my 8th birthday. I remember coming downstairs, excited, wearing a new dress my grandma had sent me. It was pale yellow with little white daisies on it. I felt pretty. I felt special. I walked into the kitchen where my mother, Evelyn, was making coffee. My father, Robert, was reading the newspaper at the table. My older brother, Mark, who was 12, was already eating his cereal. "Mom, look," I said, spinning around, the skirt of the dress flaring out. "Grandma sent it for my birthday." My mother didn't even look up from the coffee pot. She just made a small, dismissive sound. It's a bit loud for a school day, isn't it, Clara? Go change before you get it dirty." My father grunted in agreement without lifting his head from the sports section. "Your mother's right. Go put on something sensible." Something sensible, that was the story of my life. Sensible, quiet, unseen. My brother, Mark, looked at me with a smirk and then went back to his cereal. That was it. No happy birthday. No hug, no smile, just a dismissal. I went back upstairs, the beautiful yellow dress feeling like a costume I was wearing for a role I wasn't meant to play. From that day on, the pattern was set. My parents' world revolved around Mark. He was smart, handsome, and could do no wrong. He was the star athlete, the top of his class, the golden child. My parents beamed at him. They bragged about him to the neighbors. They went to all his games and parent-teacher conferences. They invested in his future, paying for private tutors and the best equipment. And then there was me. I was average. I wasn't a prodigy. I wasn't a star athlete. I was a quiet, bookish girl who preferred drawing in her sketchbook to playing sports. I liked to read and to daydream. To my parents, this was a personal failure. I was a disappointment. I was constantly compared to Mark. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" my mother would sigh. "He works so hard. You just sit there, daydreaming. You're so lazy." My father would just shake his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. He never yelled at me. He was worse than my mother in a way. He just ignored me. He looked right through me as if I was a piece of furniture that had been in the way for too long. I was assigned a strict set of chores to build character. I did all the dishes, cleaned all the bathrooms, dusted all the furniture. My chores were never seen as contributions, only as obligations. When Mark did one small thing, like taking out the trash, he was showered with praise. When I cleaned the entire kitchen from top to bottom, no one even noticed unless I had missed a spot. My grades were never good enough. A B+ was met with a frown. "You could have tried harder," my mother would say. "Mark always gets A's." My interests were ridiculed. When I brought home a drawing I was proud of, my father would glance at it and say, "That's nice, honey, but you know you need to focus on your studies. Art isn't a real career." My mother would add, "You're not going to get a job drawing pictures, Clara. You need to be practical." My brother, buoyed by our parents' constant adoration, became a master at putting me down. He did it in a subtle, insidious way. At the dinner table, he'd tell an amusing story about his day, and everyone would laugh. I'd try to join in with a quiet observation, and he'd cut me off. "Sorry, Clara, the adults are talking." He'd call me Clara the Clueless in a way that he knew would make our parents smile. They never corrected him. They never defended me. So I retreated further into myself. I built a fortress of silence around my heart. I learned to make myself as small and invisible as possible. I stopped trying to share my drawings, my thoughts, or my dreams. They were crushed before they could even form fully. My life became a monotonous cycle of school, chores, and silence. I was a robot, just going through the motions, waiting for the day I could finally leave. My 16th birthday was a brutal milestone. I knew better than to expect a party or gifts. I had learned to be pragmatic, but I still held onto a tiny, foolish sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they would remember. They didn't. The day came and went without a single mention. Not a happy birthday, not a card, not a piece of cake. It was just another Tuesday. I watched Mark open a brand new laptop from my parents a week later for getting a B+ on a history test. He got a B+, I got a B+ and got yelled at. He got a laptop. I got another reminder that I was worthless. That night, I cried myself to sleep, but I learned not to make a sound. Tears were just more evidence of my weakness. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the only light in my dark world. She lived in a small, cozy house a few towns over. She was the opposite of my mother. She was warm, she laughed loudly, and her house was filled with the smell of baking and the sound of old jazz records. She was the only one who ever saw me. She would look at my drawings and gasp with genuine delight. "My God, Clara, you have a gift. You see the world differently than anyone else. That's not a flaw, it's your superpower." Every visit to her house was a sanctuary. She would make me my favorite cookies and sit me down at her kitchen table. She didn't care about my grades. She didn't compare me to Mark. She'd ask me about my dreams, about the stories I was making up in my head. She encouraged me to fill my sketchbooks. She was my anchor, the one person who made me feel that I mattered. She saw the real Clara, the one my parents had tried to erase. When I would try to tell her how sad I was, how lonely and invisible I felt, her eyes would get a faraway look. It was a look of profound sadness. She'd hold my hand and say, "Your time will come, darling. Be patient. The world will see you one day. Just keep being you." I didn't understand what she meant then. I just thought she was trying to cheer me up. But there was a weight to her words, a deep-seated knowledge that I didn't possess. It was like she was holding a secret and was waiting for the right moment to tell me. I was just too beaten down to ask. My parents actively tried to sever the bond between me and my grandmother. They saw her as a bad influence. "Grandma spoils you too much, Clara," my mother would say, her voice sharp. "She puts foolish ideas in your head. She's too sentimental. You need to focus on the real world, not the fantasy land she lives in." They tried to limit my visits, but Grandma was a force of nature. She was their mother-in-law, and she didn't back down. She'd just call and say, "I'm picking Clara up for the day," and that was that. A few months before my 18th birthday, my grandmother passed away. It was a sudden stroke. I felt my world collapse. The one person who loved me, the one person who saw my soul, was gone. My parents were surprisingly efficient in their grief. They organized a small, quiet funeral. It was devoid of emotion. It was just another task for them to complete. At the reading of the will, we were all present in the lawyer's office. My parents were relaxed, expecting the usual inheritance. My mother was already mentally spending the money. The lawyer read the standard bequests for some old furniture and a small life insurance policy. And then he came to the primary asset, the house. My parents sat up straighter. The lawyer cleared his throat. "And the house at 12 Maple Avenue, along with all the remaining assets, are bequeathed to Clara, to be held in trust for her until her 18th birthday, and for her to take full possession of upon that day." The silence in the room was profound. I could hear my own heartbeat. My mother's face went white, then red. My father's jaw dropped. Mark looked completely baffled. "That's a mistake," my mother said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "There must be a mistake. She must have been confused. She was old. She was senile." "The will is perfectly legal and sound, Mrs. Everleigh," the lawyer said calmly. "It's been witnessed and notarized. Eleanor was of sound mind when she drew it up 2 years ago. In fact, there is a letter here for Clara from her grandmother that she requested be given to her on her 18th birthday." My mother's face was a mask of fury. "This is preposterous. We are her family. That house is worth a fortune. What is Clara going to do with a house? She's a child. She's useless." That word, useless, it hit me like a physical blow. She said it right in front of me, in front of the lawyer. It was the first time she had been so brutally honest about how she saw me. I felt the last shred of hope I had for my family shrivel and die. "I'll have this challenged," my father finally spoke up, his voice cold. This is manipulation. Eleanor always liked to play favorites. This is her final vindictive act. You can certainly try, Mr. Everleigh, the lawyer said, his tone leaving no doubt that there was no chance of winning. But I can assure you, the house is Clara's. As of her 18th birthday, which I believe is in a matter of weeks, she will be the sole legal owner. The drive home was a silent hell. My mother seethed, muttering to herself. My father gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Mark kept glancing at me, a new kind of resentment in his eyes. It was as if by being willed a house, I had committed some terrible crime against them. The weeks leading up to my birthday were the worst of my life. The atmosphere in the house was toxic. My parents stopped talking to me altogether. They looked at me with pure contempt. They had treated me like a ghost for 10 years, but now I was a hated ghost. A ghost who owned a valuable asset they desperately wanted. They tried everything. My mother attempted emotional blackmail. After everything we've done for you, she'd say, her voice dripping with false sincerity, you wouldn't be so cruel as to keep what your grandmother meant for the family, would you? We need that money for Mark's college education. He deserves a chance. He's the one with the future. My father tried a more business-like approach. Clara, it's a big house. You can't manage it. You're just a kid. It's impractical. We're your parents. We can oversee the sale and invest the money properly for your future. It's the sensible thing to do. For 10 years, I had been passive. I had swallowed their poison and accepted their judgment of me. But something had shifted inside me the moment the lawyer read that will. It was my grandmother's final gift to me. Not just a house, but a backbone. Her final act of faith in me broke the spell my parents had held over me for a decade. I said no to them. I said no to my mother's guilt trips. I said no to my father's logic. I said no, and it felt glorious. On my 18th birthday, I woke up and felt no sadness. I felt a sense of purpose. I went to the lawyer's office and received the keys to my grandmother's house and a thick, sealed envelope. It was a letter from her. I walked out of the lawyer's office and didn't go back to my parents' house. I went straight to Maple Avenue. The house was a beautiful old Victorian, a little dusty and full of memories. I sat down in my grandmother's cozy living room on her old floral sofa and I opened the letter. I could smell her perfume on the paper. With trembling hands, I began to read. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, I am no longer with you. But please, do not be sad. I am in a better place now, and I have had the joy of watching you grow into the strong, beautiful, and talented young woman I always knew you would become. I am so proud of you, more than you will ever know. You must be wondering why I left you the house. It's not just a house, my darling, it's a key. It is my last gift to you, and I hope it helps you unlock the truth. The truth is, that house holds more than just furniture and memories. It holds the answer to a question you have probably asked yourself for many years. Why? Why do your parents treat you so differently from your brother? Why do they seem to despise you when you have done nothing wrong? You are not a disappointment, Clara. You are not lazy. You are not useless. They made you feel that way to hide their own shame. I kept a secret for 30 years, Clara. I kept it because I loved your father and foolishly hoped that he would change. I hoped he would come to his senses and do the right thing, but he never did. And when I saw how they were treating you, I knew I couldn't take the secret to my grave. Clara, your father is not your biological father. The house was your real father's home. My son, John, my firstborn, he was a gifted artist just like you. He had a beautiful soul and an incredible talent. He was a dreamer, a man with more heart than ambition. He loved your mother with all his heart, but she was always a pragmatic, driven woman. They were very different. He didn't fit into her plan for her life. She was already in a relationship with Robert at the time, a relationship based on security and status. He was a safe bet, John was a risk. When your mother found out she was pregnant with you, she was terrified. A baby with John's child would have been a scandal. It would have complicated the perfect life she was building with Robert, so she made a choice. She chose Robert. She convinced him you were his child, and she broke John's heart. John was devastated. He was an artist, not a fighter. He tried to stay in your life, but your mother forbade it. She said it would confuse everyone. She said she would destroy you if he ever tried to contact you. He was so afraid of hurting you, of causing chaos, that he agreed to go away. He had a studio in the back of this house. He was here, Clara. He lived in the space above the garage. He kept it as a secret place to work, a place to think. He never wanted to completely abandon you, but he was too broken to fight for you. He lost his will to live. He wasn't strong like you. He died in a car accident when you were just 2 years old. It was a tragedy, a wasteful, meaningless tragedy. But I knew the truth. I knew he was your father. And I watched as your mother and Robert systematically tried to erase him, and you, from our lives. They molded you into a ghost of a person, because you were a constant reminder of the man she threw away and the secret they both share. They treated you as useless, Clara, because you are the living, breathing proof of their guilt and their lies. You see, if you were a success, it would be a triumph of John's blood over Robert's. It would prove that the man she rejected was somehow superior to the man she chose. So they had to break you. They had to make you feel small and worthless so that their lie could be their truth. They had to prove to themselves that Robert's genes were better. They had to prove that you weren't a threat to their precious son, Mark. But he is not your brother, Clara. He is your half-brother, and the bond you should have had was poisoned by their jealousy and fear. This house is yours. It belonged to John. He loved this place. He painted here. He dreamed here. He would have loved you, Clara. He would have adored you. You have his eyes. You have his talent. You have his soul. I saw it the moment you were born. I saw John in you, and I have seen him every single day since. You have to go upstairs, Clara. Go into the studio above the garage. There, tucked away behind the old wooden paneling in the back of the closet, you will find a box. Inside is everything. His paintings, his journals, and the truth. It is the final piece. It will help you understand. I love you, Clara. You are not a mistake. You are the most beautiful thing that ever happened to this family. And now, it is time for the truth to set you free. All my love always. Grandma Alina. The letter fell from my hands. I was shaking. A cold fury, unlike anything I had ever felt, was washing over me in waves. It wasn't just pain, it was a raw, righteous rage. 10 years. 10 years of being told I was worthless. 10 years of emotional neglect and psychological abuse. 10 years of being made to feel like a ghost in my own family. And it was all a calculated scheme. A sick, twisted plan to hide a lie. The people who were supposed to protect me were my abusers. They were monsters. I got up, my legs feeling weak. I walked through the house to the garage. A set of wooden stairs led up to a small apartment. I unlocked the door. It was dusty, smelling of turpentine and old paper. It was a time capsule. There was an easel, a cot, stacks of canvases. I went to the back of the small closet, found the paneling, and pried it open. There it was, a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside were dozens of sketches and paintings. And there, on a small canvas, was a portrait of a young woman. It was a beautiful, idealized painting of my mother, Evelyn. She was smiling, happy, a joyful light in her eyes that I had never seen in real life. On the back, in a small, elegant script, were the words, "My Evelyn, the light of my life, forever." She was the light of his life, and she had thrown him away. She had thrown me away. I found his journals. I sat on the dusty floor and read his words, chronicling his love for her, his heartbreak when she chose Robert, and his joy when he learned she was pregnant with me. He wrote about how he would teach me to paint. He wrote about his hopes for me. He wrote about how much he loved me, even though he was never allowed to hold me. He had been a good man, a kind man, a man who was broken by a cruel, selfish woman, my mother. The tears started to fall. For the first time in my life, they were not tears of sadness for myself. They were tears of grief for a father I never knew. A man who was so desperate to do the right thing that he gave up everything. And they were tears of pure, incandescent rage for my parents. How dare they? How dare they take a life like his and a child like me and destroy us both in their selfishness? I had spent 10 years feeling worthless. The truth was, the only worthless people in this scenario were them. Evelyn, a woman so driven by status and appearances that she would sacrifice her own child's happiness to protect her lie. And Robert, a man so weak, so full of ego, that he went along with it, destroying a child's spirit to feel like a man. I thought about my mother's cruelty, the lectures, the comparisons, the way she looked at me with such disdain. I thought about my father's silence, his cold, dismissive indifference. They weren't just bad parents, they were criminals. They had stolen my entire childhood from me. I picked up the painting of my mother. The joyful woman in the painting was a fantasy. The real Evelyn was a hollow, bitter shell. A woman so obsessed with her image that she had forgotten how to be human. A woman who looked at her child and saw only a threat. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my father's studio, surrounded by the evidence of my real father's love, and I formulated my plan. My grandmother had given me more than a house and a secret. She had given me the tools to get revenge. It was time for the truth to come out. It was time for my parents' carefully constructed world to come crashing down around them. The next morning, I got the first of many visits. My mother was at my door, her eyes wide with a frantic energy. She had just found out I had signed the lease on the house. "Clara, you're making a mistake. You can't live here. This is ridiculous. It's a dilapidated old place. You need to come home. You need to see reason. Think of your family." "Which family?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Are we talking about the family that has spent the last 10 years telling me I'm useless, or the family you destroyed by marrying a man you never loved?" Her face went pale. The blood drained from it so quickly she looked like she was going to faint. What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about John," I said, enunciating each word slowly, savoring the look of shock on her face. "I'm talking about your first love, the father you took away from me, the man who painted a beautiful picture of you and called you the light of his life. The man you threw away for a safe, comfortable life with a man who you turned into a monster." "Where did you hear that name?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who told you about him?" "Grandma told me, in a letter she left me. She knew the truth. She knew you were a liar and a cheat. She told me everything. About how you convinced Robert I was his. About how you banished John from my life. About how you've been breaking me down for years to hide your own shame." My mother staggered back, clutching the doorframe. "That's not true. It's not. She was a bitter old woman. She always hated me. She made it all up to turn you against me." "No," I said, stepping closer to her. "She didn't make it up. I found the proof. John was a real person, and he was a better man than Robert will ever be, and you treated me like crap for 10 years because you were afraid. You were afraid I would turn out like him. You were afraid I would be proof that you made a terrible choice." "You were too emotional, too dreamy," she spat, her mask of composure finally cracking. "You were a constant reminder. Every time I looked at you, I saw him. I saw his impossible dreams and his sensitivity. I had to toughen you up. I had to beat it out of you. I did it for your own good." "For my own good," I yelled. "You destroyed me. You broke me into a million pieces to save your own pathetic hide. You destroyed a child to protect a lie. You are not my mother. You are a monster." "You ungrateful little wretch," she hissed, her face contorted with rage. "I gave you a life. I gave you a roof over your head. I gave you food and clothes. You had it better than most people." "You gave me a life of torture," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "You gave me a life of emotional starvation, and now I know why. Now I know you did it out of fear and jealousy. I thought I was the problem for 10 years. Now I know the truth. The problem was you, all of you. You are sick. You and Robert and Mark, you're all a part of this toxic little lie you've created, and I'm going to expose it. I'm going to tell the world." Her fear was palpable. It was a scent in the air. "You can't do that. Think of your father. He's been so good to you. Think of the family name. Think of the scandal." "You should have thought of the scandal when you were making up this lie," I said. "You should have thought of the scandal when you were telling me I was useless. You should have thought of the scandal when you were pushing your own child away to protect a lie. You made your bed. Now you're going to lie in it. Get out of my house." She tried to argue, to beg, to threat, but I was immune to her manipulation now. I knew the game she was playing. I had seen the rule book in my grandmother's letter. I slammed the door in her face and leaned my back against it, taking a deep, steadying breath. The first strike had been made, the first domino had fallen, and it felt magnificent. I knew the next visit would be from Robert. I was right. He showed up that evening, his face a thundercloud of barely contained fury. He was a manager at a big insurance firm, a man used to having control. Seeing his control slip was a delicious sight. He tried a different tactic. He tried to be the stern, disappointed father. "Clara, your mother has told me what you said. That is a very serious accusation. Your grandmother was an old woman who was not in her right mind. She was manipulative and cruel. You can't believe a word she said. It's all nonsense." "Is it?" I asked, holding up the painting of my mother. "Who painted this, Robert? Did you paint this? Did you write my Evelyn on the back?" "No, John painted this. John, your wife's former lover. The man whose child you have been pretending was yours for 18 years. His face went gray. "That's a cheap copy," he said, his voice sounding hollow. "You could have painted that. You're the artist." "Oh, yes," I said sarcastically. "I forgot. You thought my art was a waste of time. You thought I was lazy. But here we are. John was an artist, wasn't he? A man who created beautiful things. And you were so insecure about it that you had to destroy me to make yourself feel better." "You're a liar," he shouted, losing his cool. "I've been a father to you. I put a roof over your head. I gave you a name." "A name?" I yelled back. "You gave me a life of silence and misery. You stood by while your wife systematically destroyed my spirit. You watched her starve me of love and you said nothing. You were worse than her. You were a coward. You knew the truth and you did nothing. You let her destroy me because it was easier than standing up to her. You were so afraid of the truth that you helped her kill the truth. But you couldn't kill me. And now, I'm going to tell everyone." He lunged at me, his hand raised. For a moment, I was afraid. But then the rage came back, hotter than ever. He was going to hit me. He was going to try to beat me into silence, just like they had beaten my spirit into submission for 10 years. "Hit me, Robert," I said, my voice a low, dangerous whisper. "Hit me, I dare you. There are witnesses everywhere. The neighbors saw you come in here yelling. If you touch me, I will have you arrested. And then I will have to explain to the police why my father, who I just found out isn't my father, assaulted me. I'm sure that story will make for a great headline. Respected insurance manager exposed as fraud. How does that sound for your future?" His hand dropped to his side. He looked defeated. The fight went out of him. He saw that the tables had turned. He was no longer the one in control. The person he had treated like a ghost for 10 years now held all the power. "What do you want, Clara?" he asked, his voice weary. "Money, I'll give you money. We'll sell the house. You can have everything. Just don't tell anyone. Think of your mother. Think of your brother. Think of the shame it would bring to the family." "For 10 years," I said slowly, "I was told that I was useless. I was told I was lazy. I was told I was a burden. Now you want to negotiate. Now you want to talk about family. You don't have a family, you have a lie. And I am going to tell everyone the truth. I am going to write it down. I am going to give it to the local news. I am going to tell the world how you and Evelyn stole my real father from me and spent my entire childhood trying to erase me. You both are going to be famous for all the wrong reasons." "You can't do this," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "It will destroy us." "Good," I said, staring him dead in the eye. "That's the point. Now get out of my house." He left. I could hear him stumbling down the steps, a broken man. The second domino had fallen. I knew I had to tell Mark. He was the last one, the golden child who had been fed the same lie as me, the same poison disguised as praise. He was a victim of their manipulation too, but he had also been a willing participant in my misery. He had grown up watching me be abused and had done nothing. He had joined in, looking for validation from the monsters who had raised us. I called him and asked him to meet me. He came to the house, a look of arrogant curiosity on his face. He was a college student now, living the life my parents had always planned for him. He still had that smirk, that air of superiority. "So, you're living in Grandma's dusty old house now, huh?" he said, looking around with disdain. "I guess you finally got your wish. You're the queen of this castle. How pathetic." "Sit down, Mark," I said. "I have something to tell you." "I don't have time for your melodrama," he said. "I'm busy." "Just sit down," I said, my voice like ice, "or I will make sure you never step foot in this town again." He sat down, the smirk finally fading from his face. He could see something different in my eyes, something he wasn't used to seeing. It was power. I showed him a picture of John, a self-portrait. "Who do you think this is?" I asked him. "How should I know?" he said dismissively. "Some homeless guy." "That's your mother's true love," I said. "That's the man she had me with before she married our father. Robert isn't my father. John is. and Mom and Dad spent the last 10 years hiding it. They treated me like crap because I was a reminder of her shame. They wanted to break me so that no one would ever ask questions, so that their perfect little family wouldn't be tarnished. Mark's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror. "You're lying," he said, shaking his head. "They wouldn't do that. They love me. They wouldn't do that to you." "Oh, they wouldn't," I said. "They told me I was useless for 10 years. They didn't love me. They hated me. And now I'm going to expose everything. The family is going to be destroyed." "No, you can't," Mark said, suddenly looking terrified. "What about me? What about my reputation?" "Your reputation?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You don't get to have a reputation. You're a part of this. You stood by and watched me suffer. You were as bad as them. But here's the thing, Mark. You're not my brother. You never were. You're just another pawn in their sick game, and you need to decide. Are you with them, or are you with me?" Mark stared at me, his mind reeling. He was so used to being on top, to being the beloved one, the successful one. Now his entire world had been turned upside down. The pedestal he stood on was gone. He was just as much a victim of our parents' lies as I was. What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice small. "I want you to tell the truth," I said. "I want you to tell your friends, your professors, your girlfriend. I want you to be a witness. I want you to confirm everything I say. You owe me that, for 10 years of silence, for 10 years of being a part of the lie." He looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he looked at me with something resembling respect. He realized he had been wrong about me all along. He had bought into the lie. He had been a tool. "Okay," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Okay, Clara, I'll do it. I'll tell the truth." The final domino fell. I wrote a detailed account of my parents' deception and abuse, my brother's involvement, and my grandmother's secret. I sent it to the town's small newspaper. I knew it would go viral. Small towns love a scandal, and this was a juicy one. I didn't just send it to the paper. I also sent it to my father's boss and to all his colleagues. I sent it to my mother's friends, to their church, to everyone I could think of. I didn't just want to expose them. I wanted to burn their lives to the ground. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Robert was fired from his job. The scandal made him unhireable in the small, conservative town. He was a laughingstock. He had been exposed as a fraud and a coward. His retirement dreams evaporated. He lost his status, his power, his everything. He was a ghost now, just like I had been for 10 years. My mother became a social pariah. Her friends, the very people she was trying to impress her whole life, abandoned her. She was seen as a liar, a manipulator, and an abuser. The church she was so devoted to asked her to leave. She had built her entire identity on being a perfect wife and mother, and now, in a single stroke, that identity was shattered. She had to live with the fact that her web of lies had caused unimaginable pain to her child, and the entire world knew it. She lost the one thing she valued most, her reputation. Mark faced his own challenges. Some of his friends abandoned him, but others stood by him, seeing him as a victim of the same situation. He was humbled. He had to face the fact that he had been a bully, and he had to make amends. He started therapy. He even came to see me one day, genuinely apologizing. It was the first time in his life he looked at me as a human being, not as a rival. But the most profound revenge was not the destruction of my parents' world. It was the rebuilding of my own. I moved into my grandmother's house, my real father's house. I found his art supplies, his paints, his canvas. I began to paint. I poured all my pain, all my rage, all my sorrow, and all my newfound freedom into my art. I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be. I took the money from the house, the savings and insurance policies I inherited, and I opened a small gallery in town. I called it Eliner's, in honor of my grandmother. I started by displaying John's work, the beautiful paintings that had been hidden away for so long. Then I started displaying my own. Word spread. People came to see the story, and they stayed for the art. My work was raw, emotional, and powerful. I painted portraits of people who had been silenced, of women who had been broken and had risen again. My art was a voice for the voiceless. It was cathartic, and it was a success. I began to get commissions. I started to make a name for myself as an artist. The same talent my parents had ridiculed, the same gift they tried to stamp out, became my salvation and my livelihood. I was a success. I was proof that they were wrong. My mother, in a last-ditch attempt to save herself, called me. She was crying, begging for my forgiveness. She said she was sorry. She said she was a victim of circumstance. She said she had a terrible life. She tried to blame it all on Robert, on my grandmother, on her own mother. I was young and scared, Clara, she sobbed. I made a terrible mistake, but I loved you in my own way. Please forgive me. I need my daughter. I need you. I listened to her for a while. I let her pour her heart out, to let her say all the things she should have said to me when I was a little girl crying in my room. When she was finally done, I spoke. You don't need your daughter, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You need a scapegoat. You need someone to blame for your unhappiness. You had me, and you made me into that person. For 10 years, I was your punching bag. I was your living reminder of your shame. You tried to destroy me, and you only stopped because you couldn't. Not because you felt bad, but because I got the upper hand. That's not true, she wailed. I'm your mother. You have to forgive me. I don't have to do anything, I said. You are not my mother. A mother protects her child. A mother builds her child up. A mother does not tear her child down to make herself feel better. You are not my mother. You are just a woman who gave birth to me. You are a stranger, and I don't forgive strangers for betraying me. Goodbye, Evelyn. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt a profound sense of peace. It was over. The cycle of abuse was broken. I had freed myself. My father, Robert, never contacted me again. He had no words for me, nothing to say. I heard from Mark that he had become a recluse, drinking himself into a stupor every night. He had lost his job, his wife, his son's respect, and his sense of self. He was a hollow shell. I don't take pleasure in his suffering, but I don't pity him either. He made his choices. He had to live with them. Mark and I started to build a new relationship. It was awkward and painful at first. We were strangers who had grown up in the same house but in different worlds, but we slowly found common ground. We were both victims of the same toxic parents. We both had to find our own way. He apologized for being a bully, for letting the poison infect him, and I accepted his apology. Not for him, but for me. I needed to let go of that last bit of anger. One evening, Mark came to my gallery. I had just finished a portrait of my grandmother. It was her sitting in her garden, a cup of tea in her hand, a smile on her face. It was the most beautiful painting I had ever done. Clara, this is incredible, he said, his voice full of awe. This is amazing. It's how I remember her, I said softly. She was the only one who ever saw me. I see you too now, he said. I'm sorry it took me so long. We stood there in silence, looking at the painting of the grandmother who had saved us both. I felt tears start to well in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. I had been so alone for so long. I had been a ghost in my own family, but I wasn't alone anymore. I had my grandmother's memory. I had my father's legacy. And now, finally, I had a brother. Thank you for telling me the truth, Mark said quietly. I know it wasn't easy, but I'm glad you did. Thank you for believing me, I replied, for standing with me. He nodded. I'm proud of you, Clara, I really am. Those words, they were the words I had been waiting my whole life to hear. I had been told for 10 years that I was useless. I had been told I was lazy, a burden, a disappointment. And now, my brother, the one who had been a part of that, was telling me he was proud of me. It didn't undo the years of pain, but it was a sign of healing. I looked around the gallery. It was full of people who had come to see the art I had created. They were telling me how much they loved my work. They were telling me I was talented. I was no longer invisible. I was seen. My grandmother was right. She always said my time would come. She always said the world would see me one day, and she was right. But I didn't need the world to see me. I needed to see myself. For 10 years, I had looked in the mirror and seen the reflection my parents had created, a useless, worthless ghost. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a survivor. I saw an artist. I saw a woman who had faced the worst of humanity and had emerged stronger for it. I saw a fighter. I saw my father's daughter. The story of my revenge is not just a story of punishment. It is a story of emancipation. It's the story of breaking the chains of a decade of psychological abuse and finding the person you were always meant to be. I didn't just get revenge on my parents. I got my life back. I got my truth back. And in getting my truth back, I found myself. I am Clara. I am John's daughter. I am Aliner's granddaughter. I am an artist. And I am not useless. I never was. The secret was never about my grandmother or my parentage. The secret was that my parents were powerless. They were the ones who were weak. They were the ones who were useless. They had to destroy a child to feel powerful, and that is the ultimate weakness. My strength was in surviving. My strength was in finding the truth and using it to set myself free. I had been treated as useless for 10 years, but I was the one who had the power all along. I just had to be brave enough to use it. And on the day I read my grandmother's letter, I found that courage, and I have never looked back.